I let my cheating husband plan his new life with his secretary, then destroyed both their careers. The morning everything changed started like any other Tuesday in our suburban home outside Chicago. I was folding laundry when I noticed his phone buzzing incessantly on the kitchen counter. He was in the shower, singing off-key like he always did when he was particularly happy about something. That should have been my first red flag, but I was too busy planning our anniversary dinner for the following week. His phone lit up again, and this time I caught a glimpse of the name on the screen. It wasn't a name I recognized, but the message preview made my blood run cold. The words were intimate, planning, discussing futures that apparently didn't include me. My hands started shaking as I realized what I was seeing. For the next 3 weeks, I became someone I never thought I could be. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored. The way he smiled at his phone during dinner. How he suddenly needed to work late every Tuesday and Thursday. The new cologne that appeared in our bathroom cabinet. The credit card statements showing purchases at restaurants I had never been to. I could have confronted him immediately, could have screamed and thrown things and demanded explanations. Instead, I did something that surprised even me. I decided to watch and wait. I wanted to see exactly how deep this betrayal went, how long he had been planning to replace me in his life. The evidence mounted quickly once I started looking. Text messages about apartment hunting, dinner reservations for two at expensive places downtown, hotel receipts tucked into his jacket pockets, phone calls that ended abruptly when I walked into the room. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore, which somehow made it worse. I discovered that she worked at his company in the executive suite where he spent most of his days. She was young, ambitious, and apparently very good at her job. She had been there for about 8 months, which coincidentally was when his behavior had started changing. The timeline was devastatingly clear. What hurt most wasn't just the betrayal itself, but how methodically they were planning their future together. They had looked at apartments, discussed vacation destinations, even talked about introducing her to his parents. Meanwhile, I was at home planning our anniversary celebration, completely oblivious to how thoroughly I had been erased from his future plans. The turning point came when I found printed emails in his briefcase. They weren't just discussing their relationship anymore. They were planning his exit strategy from our marriage. When to tell me how to divide assets, which friends they thought would take their side. Reading those messages felt like being stabbed repeatedly with tiny, precise knives. But buried in those same emails was information that would prove far more valuable than I initially realized. Details about their work projects, internal company politics, and some decisions that seemed ethically questionable. She had been sharing confidential information with him, and he had been using it to advance his own career within the company. I spent the next 2 weeks documenting everything. Screenshots, printed emails, receipts, photographs of documents he left lying around. I created a detailed timeline of their relationship, alongside a parallel timeline of his recent career advancement. The pattern was unmistakable and professionally damaging. During this time, I maintained perfect normalcy at home. I cooked his favorite meals, asked about his day, even helped him pick out a new tie for an important presentation. He had no idea that I knew about his double life, which made his casual lies about working late particularly cruel. The most surreal moment came when he asked me to help him prepare for a major client presentation. I spent hours helping him organize his materials, practice his talking points, and even ironed his best shirt. All while knowing that his success would be celebrated with her, not me. I also started making my own preparations. I consulted with a divorce attorney, organized our financial documents, and began separating my personal items from our shared belongings. I did this slowly, carefully, so he wouldn't notice anything missing. The attorney was impressed by the thoroughness of my documentation. She explained that adultery might not matter much in our no-fault divorce state, but the professional misconduct could have serious consequences for both of them. This information gave me an idea that would prove far more satisfying than any courtroom victory. I researched the company's policies on workplace relationships and conflict of interest. What I found was a strict code of conduct that both of them had clearly violated. Romantic relationships between supervisors and subordinates were strictly forbidden, and sharing confidential information outside proper channels was grounds for immediate termination. The plan that formed in my mind was elegant in its simplicity. I would let them continue planning their future together, let them get more comfortable and careless. Then, when they least expected it, I would pull the rug out from under their carefully constructed fantasy. I waited until they had signed a lease on their dream apartment downtown. I waited until they had booked a vacation to celebrate their new beginning. I waited until he had finally worked up the courage to ask for a divorce, probably thinking he was being so considerate by waiting until after our anniversary. But I didn't wait for him to actually ask. 3 days before our anniversary, I made my move. I compiled everything into a comprehensive report: the timeline of their relationship, the evidence of policy violations, the confidential information sharing, the use of company resources for personal benefit. I cross-referenced it all with company policies and presented it like a professional investigation. Then I sent it to 3 people simultaneously: the company's human resources director, the chief executive officer, and the head of their corporate ethics committee. I sent it anonymously, but with enough verifiable information that they would have to investigate. The response was swift and decisive. Within 48 hours, both of them were called into separate meetings. Within a week, both were terminated for policy violations. The company took a hard line because they were worried about potential lawsuits and reputation damage. But the story gets better. Because she had been sharing confidential client information, and because he had been using that information inappropriately, their terminations were reported to relevant professional licensing boards. This meant they would both have difficulty finding similar positions in their field. I watched from a distance as their perfect plan crumbled. The apartment lease they couldn't afford without their salaries, the vacation they had to cancel, the explanations they had to give to friends and family about why they were both suddenly unemployed. Only then did I confront him at home. I presented him with divorce papers and a detailed account of everything I knew. His shock was absolute and genuine. He had no idea how thoroughly I had uncovered his deception or how strategically I had responded to it. The conversation was surprisingly calm. He tried to apologize, to explain, to negotiate. But I had moved far beyond the point where explanations mattered. I had spent weeks processing my anger and hurt, and by the time we finally talked, I felt mostly empty. He begged me to call his former employer, to tell them it was all a misunderstanding. He promised to end things with her, to go to counseling, to do whatever it took to save our marriage. But I knew that ship had sailed the moment he decided to plan his future without me. The divorce proceedings were straightforward. He didn't have much leverage to negotiate, given that he was unemployed and had clearly violated our marriage vows. I kept the house, most of our savings, and my dignity intact. I heard through mutual friends that she blamed him for ruining her career. Apparently, she claimed he had pursued her and pressured her into the relationship. He blamed her for being careless with the information sharing. Their perfect love story had devolved into mutual accusations and finger-pointing. Neither of them could find work in their previous field for over a year. She eventually moved back to her hometown and took a job completely unrelated to her expensive education. He had to start over in a different industry, making significantly less money than he had been earning. The most satisfying part wasn't their professional downfall, though that was certainly gratifying. It was the fact that their relationship didn't survive the pressure. When the fantasy of their perfect future collapsed, they discovered they didn't actually like each other very much without the excitement of sneaking around. 6 months after my divorce was finalized, I heard they had broken up. Apparently, the stress of unemployment and the blame they placed on each other had destroyed whatever connection they thought they had. They had burned down their careers for a relationship that couldn't survive its own consequences. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding my life on my own terms. I sold our house and moved to a neighborhood I had always wanted to live in. I took a job that paid less but gave me more satisfaction. I started dating again, slowly and carefully, but with a much clearer sense of what I wanted and wouldn't tolerate. The experience taught me that revenge is most satisfying when it's patient and precise. I could have confronted them immediately, could have created a dramatic scene full of accusations and tears. Instead, I let them dig their own grave and then simply pointed out where they had buried themselves. I also learned that the fantasy of a secret relationship rarely survives the reality of actual consequences. They were so focused on the excitement of their hidden romance that they never considered what their life would actually look like once it was exposed. Looking back, I realized that discovering his betrayal was actually a gift. It showed me how much I had been settling for in my marriage, how little respect he actually had for me. It forced me to develop a strength I didn't know I possessed, and to advocate for myself in ways I never had before. The person I became during those months of careful planning and strategic thinking was someone I had never been before. I had always been the accommodating wife, the one who avoided conflict and tried to keep everyone happy. But when I needed to, I could be calculated and ruthless in protecting my own interests. I still live in the same city, and occasionally I see one or both of them around town. She looks tired and older than her years. He looks defeated in a way that makes me feel something that isn't quite pity, but isn't satisfaction either. They both wave awkwardly when they see me, as if we're all just old acquaintances with shared history. I never responded to their attempts to blame me for their career troubles. I never gloated or tried to make them feel worse about their situation. I simply moved forward with my life, which turned out to be the most powerful response of all. The whole experience lasted about 6 months from discovery to divorce finalization. But the lessons I learned and the person I became will stay with me forever. I learned that I could be strategic when I needed to be, that I could protect myself without sacrificing my values, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim. I also learned that most people who cheat aren't necessarily bad people, but they're definitely selfish people who don't think through the consequences of their actions. They get caught up in the excitement of something new and forget that their choices affect real people with real feelings. These days, I'm in a relationship with someone who shares my values about honesty and respect. I'm more confident in my ability to spot red flags and address problems before they become betrayals. I'm also more comfortable with the idea that not every relationship is meant to last forever, and that endings don't have to be failures. The anniversary dinner I had been planning never happened, obviously, but I took myself out to the restaurant I had picked, ordered the expensive wine I had selected, and toasted to new beginnings. It was one of the best meals I had ever had, and I didn't have to share it with anyone who didn't deserve to be there. Sometimes people ask me if I feel guilty about destroying their careers along with their relationship. The answer is no, not even a little bit. They made their choices knowing the risks, and they chose to violate both their marriage vows and their professional obligations. I simply made sure that their choices had appropriate consequences. The only thing I might have done differently is tell my story sooner. I spent too much time being ashamed of what had happened to me, as if being betrayed was somehow my fault. But sharing my experience has helped other women recognize similar patterns in their own relationships and given them permission to protect themselves. I'm grateful for the experience now, which sounds strange but is absolutely true. It taught me who I really am when I'm pushed to my limits. It showed me that I'm stronger and more resourceful than I ever imagined. And it proved that sometimes the best way to move forward is to make sure the people who hurt you can't hurt anyone else the same way. The last I heard, they were both doing okay but not great. She found work in a different field and seems to be rebuilding her life. He eventually found a position that pays about half what he used to make. Neither of them seems to be in a serious relationship, which makes sense given how their last one ended. I don't think about them very often anymore. When I do, it's usually with curiosity rather than anger. I wonder if they learned anything from the experience, if they understand how their actions affected not just me, but their own futures. I hope they did, because the alternative is too depressing to consider. My life now is quieter but more authentic. I have friends who respect my boundaries, work that challenges me appropriately, and a relationship built on mutual honesty and support. I sleep better at night knowing that I don't have to wonder what anyone is hiding from me or planning behind my back. The whole experience took less than a year from start to finish, but it changed everything about how I understand relationships, trust, and my own capacity for strategic thinking. I'm proud of how I handled it, and I'm grateful for the life I built afterward. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even, it's getting better. And that's exactly what I did.